I'm here at the today windy, cloudy, post-storm Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. Great place to be. Come up and visit, become a member. Anyway, this is part 2 of our discussion about creating permeability in the gardens. We're talking about turning your garden into a sponge so we can take advantage of all the water that falls on the site. Joining me again is Tim Burgess. He's with the City of Santa Barbara's Department of Sustainability and Resilience. I think I got that right. We gave everybody a shot at what permeability means in a big way. Let's talk about some specifics. How do you start figuring out how to make your garden more permeable? What do you need to look at before you start making like decisions about I'm going to do this here or that there?
Yeah, I guess you would look at the big picture, look at all your impermeable surfaces or all the places where water runs off directly.
Like
Like the roof,
the roof, yeah.
driveway, like any walkways. There are ways you can reduce those surface areas. Another thing to look at is where does that run off to? Where's that water directed to? The best place for those to be directed to is to a landscaped area where the soil is natural and there are plants growing. That way that water can run off and soak up that rainwater. Even though it's running off the walkway or the driveway or the roof, it's not running directly into the street.
So maybe start off, just do a little sketch. Doesn't have to be Da Vinci quality or whatever, but like where's your house? Where's the hardscape areas? Kind of label things so you know what's going on. What do we need to know about where the water comes from? You talked about the roof, that sort of thing. What else? How else does the water get from the sky into our garden?
There are ways that the water is conveyed. It hits the roof.
Right.
It goes into, sometimes people, if you don't have gutters, it runs directly off the roof in a line.
Seep drainage everywhere.
Sure. And then sometimes there are gutters with a downspout where it's directed to one spot. And so that's a spot where you're going to have a lot of water, and it can also be convenient. Make your landscape utilize that water.
So job one is to safety. Making sure the water is moving away from the house. I've found as a landscape architect, especially in older homes, people put in improvements and they don't necessarily retain the drainage away from the house. So I guess you want to look for areas where it might be accumulating too close for comfort.
That's right. Yeah, you don't want to create a problem with the water that then makes you sort of have to drain it all away later. So you want to,
or swim from the kitchen to the living room.
Yeah, unless you have a canoe on the sidewalk.
So I got a little sketch. I'm saying, oh, the water comes off here. It's running this way. Looking for low spots. I guess if you're thinking about it during the summertime, you're at a little disadvantage than going outside right after a storm.
Right. If you don't, but you might be familiar with the way that water goes. But you can generally look at the grade of the landscape and see where that water goes. The water can come off. Some people utilize a rain barrel, which doesn't really store a lot of water, but it can be helpful for if you want to use that to water plants later. But then the overflow from that rain barrel might go to a landscaped area. The landscaped area that it does go to, if you want to retain that water and allow it to slow down, spread out, and sink in, you might make that landscaped area flatter or slightly concave.
Let's hit that again. You want to slow it down. You slow the speed of the water.
That's right. Spread it out. It's in one
So you
spot.
want to do something to deflect it, or?
Yeah, you want to spread it out so it's utilized, so it can be spread out in a big area of soil, and that maximizes your infiltration or your permeability.
Right.
And it makes that water available to a lot more plants.
So the 3 S's, you
Slow it,
spread it,
and then sink it.
sink it.
Yeah.
And what's it sinking into?
Well, it's sinking into that soil where the roots of the plants around there can use it. Animals, microorganisms in the soil act as that microbiome that help filter that water. The water can eventually go down to drinking water aquifers. It can also move laterally and go to creeks where it comes out as spring water and very filtered, and contributes to better water quality in streams and the ocean downstream.
Top 5 things you can actually do in the garden. Either you or have a landscaper or a landscape designer design things into the garden that are going to give me more permeability. What's the simplest thing you can do just to get the water to soak in and not run through the living room?
Well, get out with a shovel and grade your landscape to be able to hold it. Move it away from the house as much as you need to move it away, but then utilize that garden in that landscape area. That's really
So,
simple. That's
so if
something-
I can create low spots, that's going to be the slow it and the sink it area. Right.
Exactly.
I've heard them called rain gardens. That's one of the approaches. We're also talking about dry creek beds, which can be, if you do them right and you've got some nice rock, you can create a very nice looking feature that way. Tim, there's a lot of materials out there that people install in their landscape. Is there anything other than concrete and the obviously permeable stuff that we should avoid using in order to increase permeability?
Yes, I would avoid using geotextile fabric, and that's sort of a woven fabric made of plastic that's often put in landscapes. And that
We're
is
talking about weed cloth.
weed cloth,
Right.
and that's often impermeable. It also creates a barrier for living organisms to get through the soil, and it often just gets broken up and becomes trash. Another thing that is not the best surface is what we call decomposed granite. It's not really granite, it's kind of a decomposed sandstone. It has a lot of fine material in it. And if you use that on as a paved surface, it is just about impermeable. So when rainwater hits it, it really runs off and it ends up rilling out and creating little channels, and it's effectively impermeable. A lot of them also include a binder that makes them
Even less permeable.
Even less permeable.
What are some of the materials we can use that are more permeable than just a solid strip of concrete?
Depending on how much pavement you need, you could start with just mulch, if that's going to work. If it's a walking surface, gravel, that is nice too. These kind of softer hardscapes.
It makes a little crunchy sound as
That's
you walk.
right.
Not a great idea if it's where you bring the trash cans in and out all the time.
Right. And if it has to be something that's hard or it gets muddy and you want to be able to walk on it a lot, something that has space around it that's permeable is ideal. So some people put flagstones down, and there's not a big area of impervious surface there, so it runs off into the landscape around it, and they don't have too big of an impact.
So even if you do, for whatever reason, have to put in a concrete surface, as long as it's pitched and that water runs off there and goes to the bigger part of the garden, that seems like we're still doing the right thing.
Yes, it does, and it depends on the size of that impervious surface compared to what it runs into. So if you have a small little walkway that drains into an equal sized or larger landscape area, then that landscape area will be able to probably handle that the runoff from that impervious surface.
Now there's more sophisticated products out there. We've seen permeable pavers. There's even permeable concrete. Is that an option as well? What would, when people talk about using pavers that are permeable, what are those things?
Yeah, those are a good alternative in a spot where you really absolutely need it paved. Driveways, even walkways, but they are designed to where the pavers or the bricks have a gap in between them.
Right, so they often just look like a standard rectangular brick.
Sure, yeah, it looks like sort of a cobbled street, and the water flows in between, and they're built typically with a layer of rock underneath them that doesn't have any sand or any kind of things in between it. So the rocks are locked together and there's space in between them, and that acts as a water storage area and gives it time to soak into that native soil underneath.
We're talking about the Mackenzie Park parking lot. I know that was done quite a few years ago where the cars park, it's those pavers. Also somewhat recently around Alice Keck Park Memorial Gardens, weren't all those sidewalks converted to the permeable pavers?
Yes.
So if you want to see examples of them, there's a couple places in town where people can go look.
Right, Plaza Veracruz, Oak Park, Stevens Park.
Yeah.
And then we did Quarantina Street, 2 blocks, the 700 and 800 block of Quarantina Street, all in permeable pavers.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Dry creeks, or the look of a dry creek, I guess the thing there is to make sure, even if you have the decorative rock, you go as far down as you can and have more permeable material like filler rock and that sort of thing in there. The lawn bowls on De La Vina Street at Spencer Adams, there's a nice little demonstration there of a dry creek.
Yeah, dry creeks are great. If you need to direct the water off-site, you can lengthen the time that it takes to get off-site, and that gives that water time to soak in.
And that's to slow it.
To slow it down, to allow it to sink in.
So these don't have to be barren. There are plants that will withstand being in soggy soil for the winter time, and then you can just let them go dry in the summertime. I think the Botanic Garden's a good place to learn more about those.
That's right, yeah, and native plants are always a good choice because they're adapted to the climate in Santa Barbara, and so they can survive without excess irrigation. They can survive off the rainwater.
Cool. A lot of great ideas. Try some of them out. You can dig a little bit deeper. We're going to put up a website where you can, places you can go where you can learn more about specific materials, how to do this in your own garden. Tim, we'll get you back for another one.
Thanks, Billy.
Thanks